The lead from Pennsylvania is recognized for questions.
Thank you, and I'd first yield to Mr. McGovern.
Well, I'm just a little confused by that last statement. You say this is not going to be fixed with laws. What the hell are we doing here then?
We are laying the foundation for an administration that will enforce these laws and
Who,
strengthening
the
their
guy
hand
who's been indicted
and strengthening their
who's been
hand to
indicted
do
four
so.
times on 91 felony counts?
I can't foresee the future, but I can
I
tell
mean,
you this.
the guy who just has been forced to pay $85 million for defaming a woman he sexually abused. I mean, that's who you. I mean, come on. I mean, this is. Then wait till then go out and campaign for this guy, and maybe he wins, and then But if law's not going to make any difference, why are we here?
Whoever the Republican and Democratic nominees are, this is going to be the question that the American people are going to have to settle at the ballot box.
I just when you say
We
the
need a
laws don't
Senate-
matter here, then we're here
we need
doing
a
this.
Senate that is
We're
just as
wasting our time,
devoted-
but that's what you think.
We need a Senate that is just as devoted to enforcing our immigration laws as the previous president was, as this House is, and we need a president with the resolve to secure our borders and defend our country, which is something
Well, if
we
this is an
presently
important, if
lack.
this is an important issue that we need to act now, then I'm just curious how my friends can defend the former president who was saying, do nothing, because we need a campaign issue.
We invite
But,
you,
Mr.
we
Nevlin, you
invite
want
you
to-
to join us.
I want to, first of all, a couple of things. First of all, these bills deal with, for the most part, with legal immigrants, not illegal immigrants. Let's get that straight. For the most part, they deal with legal immigrants. Second of all, I was not surprised. I was pleased at his honesty that Mr. McClintock a moment ago said that the whole purpose of these bills is his campaign rhetoric.
I didn't say that.
Oh, yes, you did. You said that we're here to present things to the American public, not to pass laws. I'd also point out,
With all respect,
I'd also
I
point
said
out-
we were
I
laying
had
the
to deal with it.
groundwork
I'd
for an
also-
administration that will actually enforce the laws.
okay, which is another way of saying it's a campaign issue. To lay the groundwork for an administration that will actually enforce the laws, to lay the groundwork for another administration, which is to say these bills are intended solely to be a campaign issue. I'd also point out, Mr. Chairman, or ranking member,
I like the first one better.
it'll be. The former president, Trump, who has said we shouldn't pass any legislation, no matter what it says, on immigration, so that he can have an issue, has been indicted on 91 counts, but he's been convicted of what the judge called rape. He is a convicted rapist. And that is hard to bear for someone who wants to be the next president of the United States.
Well, I appreciate that, and I thank the gentlelady for yielding.
Member, Mr. McGovern, to make any remarks he wishes to make.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for beginning this hearing by recognizing the three American service men who lost their lives in Jordan, and we pray for their families, and we also pray for those who have been wounded in that attack. Mr. Chairman, we've been hearing for months that Republicans care about border security. Bills every other week about the border. None of them ever become law. Press conferences and visits to the border amounting to nothing. Speeches and lectures about the border, all for show. Claims that Democrats don't care about border security, which is categorically false. But today I'm genuinely shocked because the Senate, at the urging of President Biden and in a bipartisan way, is working on an immigration bill to address border security. From what I hear, it's a tough bill, a bill that has things in it that I think might cause me a lot of angst. I'm not sure once I see the text if this is even something I can support. And what Republicans are saying, and let me get this right, is that they don't care about what gets negotiated. They're against it no matter what. And not because they don't like what's in the bill. They're against it because Donald Trump, who they're all afraid of, told them they have to be against it. Trump wants to demagogue the border, to use it as a campaign issue, and to scare people by demonizing immigrants and peddling fear and hate. So our side will keep an open mind until these negotiations wrap up, but please spare us the outrage and indignation. The truth is out there for everybody to see. Republicans want inaction at the border because they want to make this a campaign issue for Trump. Trump, the guy who said he would build a wall and Mexico would pay for it, remember that guy? Remember that? never even finished his stupid wall, by the way, and instead it was the American taxpayer who paid for what little of it was built. This is why people hate Washington. It's all theatrics from my friends on the other side. It's all for show, all so they can go on Fox News and blame President Biden for the border problems that they refuse to fix. Republicans wanted to cut customs and border protection personnel. They rejected President Biden's request for $106 billion for border security, and then they voted against funding for border security. And now they're against a border security deal before they even know what's in it. A deal, by the way, that conservative Republican senators say would be the toughest, strongest border security bill in a generation. Unless, I mean, maybe did I miss something? Is Tom Tillis a liberal Democrat now? Senator Tillis, who has been working on this deal, called out House Republicans. He said, and I quote, "Don't pretend that this policy isn't strong. If you want to admit you're afraid to tell Trump the truth, that's fine. But for you to take a look at this framework and say it's a half measure, you're not paying attention or you're not telling the truth," end quote. And what about Senator Langford? Is he a Democrat now? He said just yesterday on Face the Nation that you all, meaning House Republicans, and I quote, "actually don't want to change in law because it's a presidential election year," end quote. Since you're all so scared of Trump, let me quote the leader of our party, President Joe Biden, quote, "What's been negotiated would, if passed into law, be the toughest and fairest set of reforms to secure the border we've ever had in our country. It would give me, as president, a new emergency authority to shut down the border when it becomes overwhelmed. And if given that authority, I would use it the day I signed the bill into law," end quote. Now, who knows how these negotiations go? I'm keeping an open mind. But for Republicans to claim that they care so much about the border, to talk about how they want immediate action, and then to reject a border security deal before it's even been released, is really kind of cynical. It's one of the most cynical things I think I've seen in all my time here. And then there's even a question of whether these useless messaging bills that are before us today actually make it to the floor. The far right voted down a rule a couple of weeks ago in retaliation for the funding deal that Speaker Johnson struck with the Democrats. That's the fifth rule this Congress that's gone down. Republicans used to waste time passing bills that had no chance in the Senate. Now they waste time trying to pass bills that they can't even pass in the House. So we don't pass laws up here anymore. We barely even pass rules. So maybe my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, maybe Mr. Roy or Mr. Norman will tell us how they plan to vote on the rule, because if they're going to vote against the rule again, let's just save ourselves the time and not even bother with the rest of this hearing. And at the end of the day, the truth is that Republicans don't want to fix the border. House Democrats, Senate Democrats, President Biden, and now with the cooperation of Senate Republicans, we have been ready and we've been willing to work together in a bipartisan way to solve this country's problems. Republicans apparently care more about making Trump happy than border security. What a shame. I yield back my time.
Massachusetts, right?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the gentleman from Texas for yielding me the customary 30 minutes, and I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, let me set a couple of things straight. The border is not open. Now, maybe some people think it is because my Republican colleagues every day for the last 2 years have come to the floor screaming, "The border's open, the border's open, the border's open," but the border is not open, and that is just a fact. And today there are approximately 38,000 people in immigration detention, which is 4,000 more than what DHS is funded for, and roughly what the Trump administration averaged in fiscal year 2018. The Biden administration has also significantly increased removals in ways that many on our side of the aisle are concerned violates due process. Since the end of Title 42 last year, the Biden administration has removed or returned to Mexico close to 500,000 individuals. The total is nearly equivalent to the number of people removed in all of fiscal year 2019 under the Trump administration. So please, please, stop making things up and stop claiming the border is open. It is not. Do we have a problem at the border? Absolutely. Absolutely we do. But listening to the gentleman who has no solutions, I think he thinks this is Beetlejuice. If you say crisis 3 times, the problem goes away. No, you got to take some action. You got to work to try to address the issue. Democrats and President Biden want to find real, comprehensive solutions to fix it. What we need is Republicans to stop playing political games. And that is the exact opposite of what is happening here and what has been happening under this Republican-controlled House of Representatives. It is shameful. How do I know that? Because we called their bluff. Democrats said, yeah, we care about border security too. Let's get to work. And now Republicans tell us that they'd rather wait until after the election. They don't actually want the thing they've been talking about for the last year. It's all a big lie. It's all a big lie. Why? Why would they want to wait? Why don't they want to work with us to fix the border right now? I think we all know the answer. Trump called. The guy they all worship, the guy they are all frightened to death of, he called, and he's demanding that they do nothing. No action at all on the border. That's what he said, because he wants to campaign on it. I mean, what the hell is wrong with them? The Senate is working on a bipartisan border security bill, and Republicans tell us here in the House that they don't care what's in it. They'll oppose it no matter what. From what I hear, and I'm not sure that I can even support the bill that they're working on over in the Senate, but it has things in it that cause me a lot of angst. But Republicans are sure that they're against it because Trump told them to be against it. You know, because he wants, at the end of the day, all he wants is to be able to scare people by demonizing immigrants and whipping up hate and fear and appealing to racism and bigotry. It's disgusting. It is that simple. I mean, I'm not surprised. I mean, this is the guy who says, and I quote, immigrants poison the blood of America, echoing the words of Adolf Hitler. And we can't get anyone on the other side of the aisle to try to disassociate themselves with those remarks. That's who the Republicans listen to. That's who's calling the shots here. And Trump says, no action on border security, period. So please spare us the outrage and indignation. It's all theatrics. It's all for show, all so they can go on Fox News and blame President Biden for something that they refuse to fix. Republicans tried to cut, Republicans tried to cut Customs and Border Protection personnel. They rejected President Biden's request for $106 billion in funding to fix this problem. And they have consistently voted against funding for border security. You can't make this stuff up. They say we don't need more money. We just need a president who follows the law. We hear that again and again. We heard that last night in the Rules Committee. Now, I hope that they're not implying that the former president, a rapist who was just ordered by a jury to pay $83 million for defaming his victim, I hope they're not saying that he follows the law. He's been indicted 4 times with 91 felony counts. I mean, this guy's been indicted more times than he's been elected. Give me a break. That's who's calling the shots around here? It's shameful. The bottom line is that they simply do not want to fix the border crisis. House Democrats, Senate Democrats, President Biden, hell, even Senate Republicans, some of the most conservative Republicans in the Senate have been working together in a bipartisan way to solve this country's problems. We acknowledge we need to address our problems at the border, provide a pathway to citizenship for dreamers, fix our broken immigration system, and address the root causes of migration. And what does the extreme MAGA clown show in this House care about? Not fixing the border. They care about Trump, about bending over backwards for his campaign and turning this place into a circus. What a shame, what a waste of time, Mr. Speaker, what an embarrassment. I reserve my time. Clear, I mean, the Trump tax cut that created this current mess. So we can try to blame Joe Biden all they want, but this was a deliberate issue in the Trump tax cut.
Mr. Schneider, just
Am
out
I
of
right?
curiosity, how did you pay for your amendment?
Excuse me, that's not the way, we don't, I mean, I know that you could be on every committee, but you're not on the Rules Committee. Right now, you're pretending you're on the Ways and Means Committee, but that's not the way we operate here. I'm sorry, Mr. Schneider.
No, I was done with my comments.
Yeah, I know. And again, I would just say, you know, and I'm happy to yield. I mean, my friend, Mr. Massey, is a stickler for regular order. I'm happy. I don't know whether he believes that what's happening right now is regular order. This is the way we should operate. An emergency meeting at 8 o'clock in the morning on Friday on a bill that we don't even know whether the Republican majority supports. We can't get we have no date when it may come up. Is this, I'm happy to yield to the gentleman if he would like. Is this regular order in your opinion?
If you yield me time, I would just yield it to Mr. Lawler, because I've never seen one of us cut people off when they're trying to answer our question.
Well, he wasn't trying to answer a question. He was asking a question of Mr. Schneider. And the way I think it works here is that you can ask Mr. Lawler a question or Mr. Schneider a question, but witnesses don't ask each other questions in this. But if you,
I'll wait my turn then.
I'm just asking. But does anyone here? Anyone here? Maybe a show of hands think this is regular order that we're following right now? Okay. I mean, look, I'll just close, Mr. Chairman, by saying the idea that we are here at having an emergency meeting on this when there is no assurance that this is even going to come to the floor is absurd. This is not an emergency. If you want to say it is an emergency or provide political cover for one or more of your members, fine. But, I mean, this is pretend. This is not real. And I think we have to fix this. But this is not what's happening here. We've seen a lot up here under the Republican majority. I've never quite witnessed something like this. But in any event, I yield back. Gentleman from
Rules Committee.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Burgess. Let me just say, Chairman Green, I have respect for you as a member of this Congress, but quite frankly, reading what is before us, and watching all this unfold, I think you should be ashamed of yourself for bringing this kind of trash before this committee. I mean, we are here because Marjorie Taylor Greene and the Chock full of Nuts caucus wanted us to be here. Let me ask you, Chairman Green, if you succeed and Secretary Mayorkas is impeached, who replaces him? Do we know who will be in charge?
Well, I assume that there's a deputy who would step forward.
You know the name of the?
No.
You don't?
No.
So, I mean, it seems like it's a pretty.
I don't see why that's relevant.
Well, it is, I mean, because the question is, I mean, will it be somebody who is implementing Biden's policies?
So if he
or will it
murdered
be
someone, would we just not get him out of office
Well,
because
so
there's nobody named to follow him?
The answer to the question is you don't know.
You're right, I
who will
don't.
replace. Okay, so let me ask you this. When exactly did you decide to impeach Secretary Mayorkas? Do you know what the exact date was? Was it before or after April 18th, 2023?
April 18th, 2023. Now, we have proceeded with a five-phased approach, looking at this as fairly as possible.
Was it before or after April 18th, 2023?
I can't tell you when I thought this needed to happen.
Well, the reason why I ask you is I'm looking at a New York Times article
That
of
misquoted
April
me,
18,
yes.
2023, entitled "Key Republicans Tell Donors That He Will Pursue Impeachment of Mayorkas." And they have an audio, they have you on audio tape saying that you would, and I quote, "deliver charges to the House Judiciary Committee, which handles impeachment proceedings." I'd like to ask unanimous consent to insert this article into the record, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection, so ordered.
I guess the question is, why would you tell donors that you were going to impeach Secretary Mayorkas before you open an investigation? Why would you do that?
The article misquoted me. I do
I
recall
think they
that.
have you on audio, yeah.
Yeah, no, well, they did misquote me. I can tell you, I went back and checked myself.
All right, well, maybe we can ask them to produce the audio. But before completion of your investigation, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is the author of this, said that impeachment had been, and I quote, "guaranteed to her." That was on November 30th of 2023. And she said, and again, I quote, "I've been guaranteed by Speaker Johnson and Chairman Green that the House would impeach Secretary Mayorkas." Why would you promise her that you would impeach no matter what the evidence said? Or
Well,
she
by that
was
time, we'd
disappointed?
been through a lot of hearings and
So you,
reports.
so in November 30th, you did promise her.
No, I don't remember ever promising her
Is she
anything.
lying, or is she
I don't know. It could be a misunderstood conversation. That happens all the time in this building.
Yeah, well, boy, but what it sounds to me is like this whole thing is a predetermined performative political stunt. I
Well,
mean,
if I-
it's not about the evidence or the Constitution. I think what's happening here is you guys are doing this because Trump told you to.
Mr. Trump has
yeah.
never asked me to do that, and I want to be on the record with that because the accusation has been made multiple times.
But again,
And to your point about me being embarrassed, sir, I took this oath to the Constitution when I
Well,
was
Trump-
17 at
Trump
West Point.
tweeted- Trump
The
tweeted-
Constitution matters
Yeah,
to me.
Trump tweets his.
Not,
Yeah, what I'm learning is that Trump tweets.
Let's not talk over each other because our stenographer has trouble with that.
Yeah, so
Sorry.
Trump tweeted that he wanted him gone.
I
So
don't
that's
even
nothing, yeah. Well,
think I follow
it's
him.
hard for me to believe that the Republicans in this House, do not pay attention to every word that is tweeted or uttered by the former president, because you seem to be following his orders to a T. Let me ask you, Chairman Green, if it gives you any pause that so many staunch Republicans and colleagues of yours say that you have no cognizable basis here for impeachment. I don't know if you've heard these quotes, but I'd like to ask you to respond to some of them. A political stunt, and I'm quoting Secretary Michael Chertoff, who's a Bush administration DHS secretary. Another quote, "Secretary Mayorkas did not commit an impeachable offense. He is not guilty of high crimes or misdemeanors." That was Representative Ken Buck, who is a Republican in this House. Mr. Chairman, can I have order in the committee, please?
Yeah, committee will come to order.
Yeah, no. Another quote, these are not impeachable offenses," Representative Tom McClintock. Quote, "I haven't seen the constitutional standard met yet," Senator Mitt Romney, who actually ran for president as a Republican nominee against Barack Obama. Quote, "There is no current evidence that he is corrupt or committed an impeachable offense. That is why the case has not been made to impeach Alejandro Mayorkas." That was Jonathan Turley. I guess I find it shocking the number of Republicans who have basically come out and said that this is nuts. And these are just moderate Republicans. It's a lot of hardcore conservatives have said, let's hit the brakes here. What is your response to all these people who seem to have a real problem with this on the Republican side?
well, Mr. Ranking Member, obviously I disagree with them. But as I was saying earlier, I took the oath to the Constitution when I was 17 on the plane at West Point. Spent 24 years living under that oath as an officer in the United States Army. And I will tell you that my oath wasn't to the people, it wasn't to the geography, it wasn't to the flag, it was to the Constitution. Same oath we take for this job. This secretary has disregarded a co-equal branch of government, 7 specific laws that he has subverted and basically had his people break those laws. And I find that having a cabinet secretary get to pick and choose which laws this body passes is unacceptable. And if he were a Republican, I'd be doing the exact same thing.
Well, I appreciate the answer, but that's not the answer to my question. Let me ask you yes or no, and this is really, I think it's a simple yes or one-word answer. Do you think Congress needs to pass new laws to fix our problems at the border?
We absolutely need to pass laws. H.R. 2 is sitting over there waiting on the Senate to pass it.
Well, as you know, we have a Republican-controlled House, barely. You have a democratically controlled Senate, barely. You have a Democratic president, so obviously there has to be some give and take. The Senate has been working in a bipartisan way, and you're saying something that, quite frankly, one of our colleagues said the opposite of last week in the Rules Committee. He said that we didn't need any new laws, but you're saying we need new laws. And I guess if that's the case, what's your response to Speaker Johnson refusing to bring up the Senate bipartisan bill to address the problems at the border? Because I'm just trying to
I
understand
appreciate
the
that
rationale of people complaining that we need to better control our border, but yet there seems to be a pretty tough border security bill coming out of the Senate, and you guys are basically saying dead on arrival.
Well, there's a couple of reasons. Number one, the way this bill is written, it actually facilitates more, just what's happening right now. It codifies the things that are currently against law that Mr. Mayorkas is doing. And it's rather interesting that we're negotiating more law, which I agree, we need to fix some things, to hand to a secretary who has chosen to break the law. I'll give you an example I said in my opening statement. In H.R. 2, we actually requested more Border Patrol agents than the president did in his supplemental. So it's not an issue of we don't want to address needs.
Well-
The issue is what those people are going to be used for. Processing more people into the country is not the right answer. That just creates more of the incentive and brings more waves of people.
Policy disagreements are really not the basis to impeach.
It is to
cabinet
write law,
secretaries,
though, right? It is if we're writing
And by the
law.
way, just
But
for the
once it's
record,
enacted.
just for the record, Homeland Security is detaining more people at the border than Congress has given them money for.
Sir, they've decreased their
yeah.
request for ICE detention beds every year.
right,
That doesn't make sense. They're actually creating the problem.
But going back to my question, which was like, why not have a debate and vote on what some very conservative senators, have negotiated with Democrats? Explain to me why Congress should not have the opportunity to debate or vote on that.
I don't understand why the Senate hasn't debated the bill we sent them, and let's get it into conference committee. As I understand it, when we pass a bill, like the NDAA, I was on Armed Services for a while. They pass a version, or they take our version and amend it, and then it goes to conference.
Well, I think the difference here, if I could, just
Please.
be clear, I mean, and to the best of my knowledge, Vice Chair Thompson, I don't think you were asked to sit down and to negotiate with Republicans on H.R. 2, were you? I don't know if anybody was. This was a purely partisan bill. By contrast, in the Senate, they have worked out a partisan bill because I think they realize that a purely partisan bill will probably never see the light of day, will never become law. So the question is, if you want to get something done, you got to work in a bipartisan way. Hey, if you guys maintain control of the House and you win the Senate and you win the presidency, you can do whatever you want to do. That's just not the reality we're dealing with. And I just want to stay for the record. Someone just sent me this breaking news in a statement to Fox News. You guys all watch Fox News. The Border Patrol Union says that they support and endorse the bipartisan border deal negotiated in the Senate, saying it's not perfect, but far better than the status quo. And so, I'm just curious why not welcome an opportunity to have that debate and discussion on the floor? And even if you can't get 100% of what you want, something's better than nothing, I think, right?
Well, if you take the 5,000 that they want to allow to come in every day and multiply that times 365 and multiply that times an average of $15,000 that the drug cartels collect per person, that's how many billions of dollars we're giving to the drug cartel with this bill. And I'm sorry, sir, I just can't support that.
I guess the answer is that.
Not this one. Maybe another version, but not this one.
Yeah, well, the answer is that the hell with bipartisanship. It's
No, I
our
have
way
a
or the
Reagan
highway.
O'Neill club.
Right, yeah.
I bring Democrats and Republicans to my house. We sit down and negotiate and talk about stuff all the time.
We're the Rules Committee. You can call it up and have amendments to it if you want.
I'll be surprised if it gets out of the Senate, but
I know
We'll see.
Trump weighed in, he's against it, so maybe not. You say that you would impeach a Republican, for if a Republican were releasing people back into the United States.
no, sir. I said if they were violating the laws passed by
Let me
this
show you.
body.
Okay, but you keep on talking like somehow that the border was solved when Trump was
No,
president.
there were
Yeah,
people who came
right.
in,
So in the
but it
final
was
two-
fixed.
In the final 2 years of Trump's presidency, the Cato Institute, which my friends on the other side of the aisle like to quote, says that there were 700,000 migrants released into the United States pending their immigration proceedings. Was that Trump's DHS Secretary Nielsen's fault?
I'd have, which year are you talking about,
In
Mr.
the
Ranking
final
Member?
2 years of Donald Trump's presidency.
So 700,000 over 2
I mean,
years.
that's what Cato says, and was Secretary Nielsen's fault? Should she have been impeached for that?
As I understood the way she executed the law, she attempted to detain first, and then when the resources were exceeded, there were people that were, on a case-by-case basis, paroled into the country. The current methodology, as the courts have ruled, is just the opposite.
The resources are exceeded now, Chairman Green.
No, they're leaving ICE detention beds empty.
Yeah, well, I mean, anyway, but should she have been impeached for that?
As I said, and as the courts have ruled, Mr. Mayorkas, contrary to even Barack Obama, many other presidents, secretaries of Homeland Security, has done just the opposite of what they've all done, and he is releasing immediately into the country against the laws written by this Congress.
Yeah. You know what, I'm going to, it is so sad that this is what we are doing right now. I want to ask unanimous consent to insert into the record a Wall Street Journal article entitled "Don't Impeach Alejandro Mayorkas" by Michael Chertoff.
Without objection, so ordered.
And let me just quote a little bit from this article. And he said, and I quote, I can say with confidence that for all the investigating that the House Committee on Homeland Security has done, they have failed to put forth evidence that meets the bar." He went on to say, quote, "I don't agree with every policy decision the Biden administration has made. There are aspects of immigration strategy that are worthy of debate. But House Republicans are ducking difficult policy work and hard-fought compromise. Impeachment is a diversion from fixing our broken immigration laws and giving DHS the resources needed to secure the border." You know, I say that, I wanted to highlight this because this is a Republican who is in the former head of Department of Homeland Security. And one of the things that, he and others have said, even those who may not agree with everything that Secretary Mayorkas has done, is that he is a decent and honorable public servant who has given his life in service to this country. And the fact that for political purposes, because that's what this is all about, this is the first time that we have ever impeached a sitting cabinet member. First time we've ever tried to. And I hope at the end of the day that there'll be enough Republicans who will understand the severity of what we are doing here. But to go after a good, honorable, decent man, to try to drag his name through the mud like this, I think is unconscionable. We want good people, Democrats and Republicans, to serve in government. As I said before, if policy disagreements were the basis to be able to impeach cabinet secretaries, I would have voted to impeach every one of the secretaries in the last administration. I think were horrible, horrible. But that's not the way it works. I don't know. Let me ask Mr. Thompson if he has anything he wants to add.
Well, thank you very much. I think that the issue for a lot of us is that Congress makes the laws. The administration deals with the policy. All the issues that have been identified in this impeachment, there's a fix that Congress can do. The secretary has to do it within whatever the law is. He's tried, he's had opportunities to interpret the policies and try to make them work. But we need to provide more resources to the department. Only Congress can do that. We need to make sure that we have more patrol along the border. Congress can do that. We need technology. We need a lot of those things. And one of the things that concerns me the most is that a majority of the people on the committee who have had an opportunity to vote and provide resources to the department voted against providing resources. Now you want to impeach the man because you say he's not doing his job because the border is not secure. Give him the resources. We try to give the resources. A majority of our committee that has had an opportunity to vote to provide resources to DHS voted against it.
I appreciate that. And again, with all the things that we should be doing, that we're here doing this, which to me is purely political, is really a shame. I'm looking at the Committee on Homeland Security and kind of what you guys have been working on or not working on. Your committee, Chairman Green, has held zero full committee hearings on emergency preparedness, cyber threats, infrastructure protection, transportation security, Department of Homeland Security management, or information sharing and intelligence efforts. Your committee has marked up only 14 bills thus far this Congress, compared to the 36 bills passed out of the committee by this same time last Congress under Democratic control. And instead, we are here bringing this sham impeachment to this committee today. I would urge that maybe some attention be given to these other matters, which are clearly important for the security of our country. And I want to close with going back to Senator Langford, again, an impeccably conservative senator, who said, some of his quotes were, quite frankly, I was surprised at some folks that said, it'll take me days and weeks to be able to read through the bill. This is the bill that the Senate Democrats and Republicans have came to an agreement on. Yet within a few minutes, they tweeted out their opposition after saying it's going to take them days or weeks to read the bill. He said on a Fox News interview, the key aspect of this, again, is we are, as Republicans, going to have press conferences and complain the border is bad and then intentionally leave it open, ? And he said, I would remind folks that during the Trump administration, we also had days of more than 4,000 people that were illegally crossing the border in 2019, and they were struggling because there were gaps and loopholes in the law. And again, on impeachment, he said, Mayorkas is carrying out President Biden's policies. You can swap secretaries, the policies are going to be exactly the same. And I think the follow-up to that is unless you change the laws. And what this is all about here today is not about securing the border. It is not about stopping the flow of fentanyl into the United States. It is not about anything that matters to anybody in this country. This is politics at its worst. This is a, Marjorie Taylor Greene production. And if that's the face of the Republican Party right now, I'll have at it. I feel bad for my Republican colleagues who, many of them I know better. But this is not what we should be doing. And again, in defense of Secretary Mayorkas, he's a good, honorable, decent man. He doesn't deserve this. Doesn't deserve this. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back.
I would just note that member day counts as a hearing under the rules, and it is a tax cut, so it does not need a pay-for under the rules.
And it may not need a pay for, but, I guess we were in the habit of paying for things because we actually care. When we say we care about the deficit and the debt, we actually mean it. But in any event.
You've increased spending by $5 trillion in 2 years. You're not in the habit of paying for anything.
Yeah, let me ask you a question. So since you're the only one here on the Ways and Means Committee, does the Ways and Means Committee make it a habit to skip markups of bills that are about to become law?
I don't want to speak for all of my colleagues on the Ways and Means Committee, but I suspect, like me, most of them take offense to tax bills and other bills of our jurisdiction not coming through our committee.
I find it absurd that we're saying that member day counts as a hearing on legislation like this, that, and again, there's no markup, that's the other part of this, but if that's the new standard here, then we, boy, that changes everything, how we do it. Can anybody here answer me, and I'll just end with this, because I'm just trying to figure out what the hell is going on here. Is this just an exercise in pretend to be able to give some members some video to put in a campaign ad to say that they're fighting for their constituents? Which, by the way, you can't do. You're not supposed to do that. So just so you know, you can't take video from hearings and put it in a campaign ad. But what are the assurances that this is real? That we're actually going to do this? That's going to pass? That the Senate will take it up? And you couldn't even assure me that you got the votes here in the House, and you can't even tell me whether the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee supports this. So what are the assurances that this will become law? We can't even get a date when this is going to come up. So can anybody tell me that we get assurances that this is all
With
for real?
with all due respect, for my constituency and for constituencies across this country, this is a very real issue.
I'm not saying
Biden
it
inflation has crippled our economy. It has cost millions and billions of dollars for hardworking constituents all over this country. And so to belittle or demean the effort to provide real tax relief to constituents across this country, where were you? Why weren't you standing up for your constituents, fighting for this to be included in the tax bill?
Well, I'm not in the
Mr.
Ways-
Schneider's on the Ways and Means Committee.
Where
Where
were
were
you?
you?
Where were you?
Why would you support a bill coming
Where
out
were
of
you, Mr.
committee
Where were you, Mr.
that-
Lawler?
That doesn't include salt
Where-
relief?
where-
was Senator Wyden? Why didn't Senator Wyden fight for this in his negotiations?
Excuse me, I control the time.
The first bill that I introduced
you can
was to
filibuster
provide
when the
this
Republicans
relief.
yield to you. But where the hell were you?
I've been fighting for this relief.
Here we are at the last minute. I mean, your party is in control. And by the way, this problem...
This was a negotiation between Senator Wyden and Chairman Smith,
Right,
if I may.
Who is...
I would just ask both, let me interrupt quickly. Just ask both of you not to speak over one another. It's very difficult on our stenographer. So with that, yield back to...
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Last time I checked, Chairman Smith was a Republican and part of your party.
And Senator Wyden is a Democrat.
And number one. Number two, I want to point out for the record, the reason why we have this problem is because of the Trump tax cut that you guys all supported. You weren't here, I don't think, when we passed it, but the bottom line is Republicans supported. That's why this needs to be fixed.
Which Senator Schumer could have filibustered in the Senate, but did
This needs
not.
to be fixed.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts recognized.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the gentleman from Pennsylvania just kind of regurgitated a whole bunch of statistics. I'm not going to rebut every single one of them, but he went through a whole litany of things that are wrong with our country. Well, you know what? Here's a novel idea for Republicans. Rather than just complain, maybe actually try to find some solutions. If all the things the gentleman says are problems that we need to deal with, here's a suggestion. Get about the business of passing legislation in a divided Congress to fix them. This is the least productive Congress, I think, in decades, in my lifetime. I don't know. I think since the Great Depression. I mean, my friends have done nothing. They've done nothing. They come to the floor and they complain. This is not just a do-nothing Congress. This is a do-nothing Congress over and over and over and over again. I mean, we're doing reruns this week. We've dealt with this legislation. This is the fourth time we're dealing with it. And I predict that we'll probably deal with it a fifth and a sixth and a seventh and eighth time, before the end of the year when hopefully your majority comes to an end. And I don't want to be lectured about jobs from somebody who supported Donald Trump, who when he was president had the worst job record since the Great Depression. And I don't want to be lectured about blue-collar workers. I come from an area in Massachusetts where we actually stand proudly with our unions, something that my Republican colleagues fight against every single day in this chamber. So please. And I was just giving some friendly advice to the gentleman based on the results of last night's election, which my Republican friends were predicting a victory. But I'm saying that the reason why you did not win last night is because people think that what you're doing is not the right thing. Your ideas are unpopular, and they're sick of the incompetence and the inaction. They're sick of the complaining and no solutions. You complain about the border. Democrats and Republicans work together in the Senate to come up with a bill. Maybe it's not everything you want, but it was negotiated by some pretty conservative right-wing Republicans. And rather than bringing it to the House floor so we can have a debate and a vote, The Republican speaker and the leadership says, no, it's not allowed to be considered on the House floor. And again, the gentleman talks about national security. I mean, I just, none of us can understand the game that Republicans are playing with Ukraine. I mean, how can you do this to the Ukrainian people? I mean, playing into the hands of Vladimir Putin. I mean, are Republicans cheering a Putin victory against Ukraine? If so, that's sick. I mean, the Senate passed this overwhelmingly in a bipartisan manner, and the Speaker said it's dead on arrival. We can't even consider it here. And I just want to also say, because I think it's important for the record, last night in the Rules Committee, Ms. Scanlon of Pennsylvania offered an amendment to the rule to make an order, amendment number 2 to H.R. 7176, offered by Representative Houlihan, which requires the Commission to deny applications with regards to covered foreign countries, including China, North Korea, Russia, and Iran, as well as foreign entities owned by, controlled by, or subject to the jurisdiction or direction of the government of those countries. You know what, Mr. Speaker? It was defeated, 4-9. Mr. Burgess, Mr. Reschenthaler, Ms. Fischbach, Mr. Massey, Mr. Norman, Mr. Roy, Ms. Houchin, Mr. Langworthy, Chairman Cole, all voted no. All voted against making that amendment in order, which would have made sure that none of these countries that I just mentioned would benefit in any way, shape, or form. So sometimes we come to the floor, we debate these issues, and I'm not quite sure, whether we're dealing in reality or an alternative universe, but the bottom line is, if the gentleman cared about the things he just said, why couldn't we make this amendment in order and have an up or down vote on it? Why was this such a radical idea? Why was this such a bad thing to do? I mean, in any event. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to now yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from New York, a great colleague, Mr. Ryan.
The gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the gentleman from Pennsylvania for yielding me the customary 30 minutes, and I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, let me say to my Republican friends, enough with the lectures. I just spent the last hour listening to the debate on the previous rule, where the Republicans were basically saying the Democrats had an obligation to fix what the Republicans screwed up to begin with, that we basically have to clean up their mess. And then I just heard the gentleman talk about, our obligation to our allies and as the basis for this crummy piece of legislation that we're now talking about. Really? To get a lecture from Republicans about our obligation to our allies, why they are blocking aid to Ukraine as we speak? The Senate, with a 70-vote margin, passed in a bipartisan way aid to provide essential aid to Ukraine so that Putin will not have a victory, will not invade Ukraine. So when I hear my friend talk about an obligation to our allies, I would urge him to ask his Speaker to please let the House work its will to bring this bill to the floor. Let us have a vote. What we're talking about here today is ridiculous. Mr. Speaker, this will be the 4th time this Congress, that language either identical or nearly identical to this bill has been reported out of the Rules Committee. First, it passed as part of the Republicans' destructive H.R. 1 energy package. Then Republicans tried to pass it as a standalone bill, but had to pull the rule for the bill from the floor because they didn't have the votes. The 3rd time the bill was put on the floor, but it failed to pass because the MAGA clown show threw a fit after not getting what they wanted. And now here we are again for the 4th time. Now, I don't know if my Republican friends have looked at the calendar recently, but Groundhog Day was actually last week. I mean, maybe they think this is Nick at Night and they want to start airing more reruns. But this is Congress. This is Congress. Congress. And the American people vote for us and they pay us because they expect us to work together to get things done. Now, the only real difference this fourth time around is that Republicans, and you really can't make this stuff up, but Republicans blocked Democratic amendments that were made in order the last two times. The last two times this bill came through the committee, they made 2 Democratic amendments in order. And now they've been blocked because this is a completely closed rule. And last night I asked my colleagues across the aisle, why? Why did you block 2 Democratic amendments that were germane, that were made in order? And the previous times we looked at this bill. And nobody could answer. My Republican friends just kind of looked at each other and shrugged. Now, I'm assuming it must have been a directive of the Speaker. Maybe Speaker Johnson decided that he doesn't even want to pretend to care about bipartisanship anymore. And that's why he told Republicans to block Democratic amendments that were made in order in previous rules. So we are dealing with a completely closed rule. And the worst part is that this whole circus is for a garbage LNG bill. You know who's happy about this Republican LNG bill, Mr. Speaker? Big oil CEOs, fossil fuel tycoons. China is thrilled with what my Republican friends are doing today. Wall Street is applauding them. This bill is awful for hardworking American families. It's awful for people who are worried about high energy prices. And it's awful for our climate. The American people are worried about climate change. They say we need action. Now, I don't know if my Republican colleagues got the memo, but climate change is real. And thankfully, President Biden is doing something about it. And Republicans still can't answer another simple question from us. Why do they want to turn LNG into a Wild West that mimics the oil market? For people that are sick of OPEC and Russia fixing the prices that we pay at the pump every day, like I am, just know that this bill makes it easier for that to happen with LNG. Now, Republicans talk a big game on China. Their bill helps China, and it helps other adversaries who rely on American LNG imports. The truth is, this is just another handout to the GOP's best friends. They want to make sure that big energy CEOs and corporations can pad their pockets while raising prices on all of us. Follow the money. Look who contributes to them. And that tells you all you need to know about why we are dealing with this bill today. This entire week is just a masterclass in Republican incompetence. My friend across the aisle tells us routinely how crucial their bills are, how important they are. And then the bills are defeated, not by Democrats, but by Republicans. Republicans just wasted time debating a rule that would bring to the floor a one-year limited fix to the salt problem that they created with their Trump tax scam. They caused the problem. And now we are debating a rule that they didn't even have the votes for last week and is likely to fail on the floor today. Now, last night, they impeached Secretary Mayorkas by 1 vote. 1 vote. They had to rush and redo that one before Tom Suozzi was sworn in. And the Rules Committee is supposed to meet on a new FISA bill later today, our 3rd attempt at that this Congress. Maybe this one will pass, who knows. Again, everything we are doing this week is a rerun. Another impeachment vote, the FISA bill, the SALT bill, this LNG bill, all because Republican leadership keeps bringing half-baked ideas to the floor without knowing exactly where their own conference stands. Didn't work the first time, or sometime even the second or third time. Guess we have to do it again. Look at what's going on in this country. My Republican friends are barely hanging on to this majority by their fingernails. You would think, Mr. Speaker, that Republicans would look at the results of last night's election and have a come-to-Jesus moment. The American people are rejecting Republican extremism. They are voting against Republicans' cynical move to tank the bipartisan border deal. I mean, I don't know if you looked at some of the exit polls and some of the commentary about people who were voting yesterday. People are puzzled while my Republican friends made such a big deal about the border crisis, and then you have a bipartisan border deal that is negotiated in the Senate, and then the Speaker of the House says it will never see the light of day, and we don't need any legislation. People are seeing through this cynicism. People are against the sham impeachment of Secretary Mayorkas. What a offensive waste of time that was yesterday. I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe MAGA-based donors are impressed by that kind of behavior, but does nothing about anything at the border. It's more grandstanding. People are sick of that. And here's the deal. People actually want Republicans to work with Democrats to get stuff done. What a radical idea. They're coming to Congress that people would try to work together to pass legislation to help improve the lives of the people we represent. But that's not what this is today. That's not what we've been seeing the last several months. You know, I pointed this out the other day, but I think it's worth repeating again. You know, the Rules Committee is kind of the traffic cop of Congress. Almost every major piece of legislation that comes to the floor goes to the Rules Committee. You know, certainly legislation of consequence. And the last time the Rules Committee brought a bill to the House floor that actually became law, that was signed, passed the Senate and signed by the President, was not like 9 months ago. So all this time bringing these messaging bills to the floor, you know, the impeachment of Mayorkas, all this garbage that is being brought to the floor, and none of it becomes law. I mean, like, why are you here? Why are you here? You know, Mr. Speaker, we are here today considering the same old bills over and over and over again because the Republican Party has nothing to offer but chaos, confusion, and disarray. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I reserve my time.
This reserves. The gentleman from Michigan. Massachusetts is recognized.
I reserve, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
I would just ask if the gentleman from Massachusetts has additional speakers. If not, I'm prepared to close.
We're prepared to close.
The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself the remaining time.
The gentleman is recognized.
So, Mr. Speaker, Democrats have had to make some tough decisions about how to vote on this rule. And let me tell you why I voted to support it last night. I have disagreements with many aspects of the various pieces of legislation that will come before us. And there are some of these pieces that I will vote against. But again, there will be separate votes and there'll be separate debates. But as we learned last night in the Rules Committee, the alternative that some of my Republican friends were pushing to this approach was an Israel-only package with no humanitarian aid, not just for the people of Gaza, but for any suffering people that the aid would benefit, and some really ugly border provisions, which I found unconscionable, and some other bad stuff as well. Democrats, once again, will be the adults in the room. And I'm so glad Republicans finally realize the gravity of this situation and the urgency with which we must act. But guess what, Mr. Speaker? You don't get an award around here for simply doing your damn job. President Biden told us last year, 6 months ago, over 6 months ago, that this was urgent and important, that Ukraine needed us, that Putin was not going to stop, that the war against the Ukrainians was particularly vicious. Every major human rights organization in the world has told us the impact of Russia's attack against Ukraine. The Senate voted months ago. The Senate can barely agree on what to have for lunch, and they voted months ago. And what did the House do? What did my House Republican friends do? Nothing. No action to help our allies. It's all delay, distract, deny, and blame Joe Biden. Now, I would just say to my colleagues, look at what MAGA extremism has gotten you. Nothing. Nothing. Not a damn thing. In fact, it has empowered Democrats At every critical juncture in this Congress, it has been Democrats who have been the ones to stand up for our country and do the right thing for the American people. Democrats ensured the U.S. didn't default on its debt last year, in case anybody forgot. Democrats supplied the votes to keep the government running in September of last year, in November of last year, and in March of this year. Democrats supplied the votes to pass the National Defense Authorization Act. Democrats supplied the votes for the tax relief bill that passed earlier this year. Democrats have done the job that Republicans have refused to do. And again, we have different priorities, and I think based on what I've heard in this last Congress, different values. And we don't even agree on a lot of what has come before the full House. But Democrats have done the job that Republicans have refused to do. And we don't want an award for it. We don't want a trophy for showing up to work. All we want is for Republicans to do their job, stop blaming Joe Biden for their own incompetence, and work with our side to find common ground. We are in a divided government. A Democrat is president, a democratically controlled Senate, and we have a narrow Republican majority here in the House. Nobody's going to get everything they want. We have to work together. We have to compromise. And I hope today's vote loosens the grip that MAGA extremism has on this body, and especially when it comes to supporting our allies. You know, the Rules Committee is the committee that has been known as the traffic cop of Congress. Every bill of consequence comes through the Rules Committee. I mean, we set the bills, for debate, set the bills for debate on the House floor. The last bill that the Rules Committee reported that actually became law was almost 10 months ago. All the other bills that we have sent that have been over to the White House, Senate and the White House to become law, it had to be brought up under different processes and procedures. I mean, let that sink in. Something's not working here. And you either want to be a body that is constructive and that gets stuff done, or you just want to be, a party that just obstructs everything and gets nothing done. Because at the end of the day, there's nothing to show for all the yelling and screaming and finger pointing that we see on a regular basis on this House floor. My friends have to choose. History's going to judge them by how they answer one simple question. Are they going to work together with Democrats and, in this case, stand with our allies and stand for America? Or are they going to throw in their lot with MAGA, Trump, and Putin? We are living in very uncertain times, Mr. Speaker, and people around the world are counting on this country to stand up and lead. People in Ukraine, people in Taiwan, people in Gaza, people in Israel. The eyes of the world are on this body. There's a lot of things in this package I disagree with. And in my opening statement, I talked about my concern about the unconditioned aid package to Israel, which and my concern that Netanyahu's government is not moving in a direction that, quite frankly, is a direction that I think will lead to more security for Israel, but exactly the opposite. I worry that what he is doing is, quite frankly, a violation of the human rights of so many innocent people in Gaza and in the West Bank. I was hoping that they would pursue a different pathway, and instead we now hear that he wants to go into Rafah. There's a famine happening in Gaza. People are starving to death. Aid is being frustrated from getting there. Food, medicine, important supplies. People are dying. Surely we should all care about that. We should be able to advocate for Israel's security, but also advocate for the people of Gaza, children of Gaza, senior citizens, people who are just trying to get on with their lives. But notwithstanding that, notwithstanding the fact that we may have disagreed, and some of my Republican friends obviously disagree that we ought to be whether we should be helping Ukraine or not. I disagree with you. I mean, fine, but we have a process that you will be able to vote on all of these things separately, and you'll be able to make your views clear. But I got to tell you, you don't have to agree on everything to agree on something, and we ought to agree that these issues are important enough to debate and to have up or down votes on. The people who are advocating that we do nothing, or that we attach things to this bill that will guarantee that it goes nowhere in the Senate, and therefore we help nobody. I don't understand why you're even here, quite frankly. We need to move this process forward. The House has to function. And as we've seen, under Republican control, that only happens when Democrats are the adults in the room. And I say that not to be partisan. I say that because that's what's been happening. I gave you a list of things that needed to be done, not just in terms of helping our allies, but in terms of saving our economy, that could not have been done unless Democrats stood up and behaved like adults. And this should have been dealt with a long time ago, months ago. But here we are. Here we are. And so I hope that we proceed, that we have rational and thoughtful debate, knowing that we will have disagreements and knowing that some of us will have different ideas on how we should proceed forward. But this is the United States House of Representatives. We are supposed to debate issues. We are supposed to vote on things. And unfortunately, this has become a place where trivial issues get debated passionately and important ones not at all. Well, these are important issues that are in this bill. Again, some of them I agree with, some of them I don't agree with. But let's debate them, let's vote on them, and then let's move on. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Gentleman from Massachusetts yields back. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will yield myself the balance of our time.
Last night, the Rules Committee met and produced a rule, H.Res. 1247, providing for the House's consideration of several pieces of legislation. The rule provides for H.R. 4763, the Financial Innovation and Technology for the 21st Century Act, to be considered under a structured rule. It provides 1 hour of debate, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Financial Services or their designees, and provides for 1 motion to recommit. Additionally, the rule also provides for H.R. 5403, the Central Bank Digital Currency, CBDC, Anti-Surveillance State Act. H.R. 5403 would be considered under a structured rule, and it also provides for 1 hour of debate, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Financial Services or their designees, and provides for 1 motion to recommit. Finally, the rule also provides for consideration of H.R. 192, a bill which would prohibit non-citizens from voting in elections in the District of Columbia, to be considered under a closed rule. It also provides 1 hour of debate, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Oversight and Accountability or their designees, and provides for 1 motion to recommit. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of this rule and in support of the underlying pieces of legislation, beginning with H.R. 4763, the Financial Innovation and Technology for the 21st Century Act, or FIT 21. Mr. Speaker, I'm very glad that the rule provides for consideration of this legislation. As a member of the Financial Services Committee, we've spent countless hours trying to develop a responsible regulatory structure for blockchain technology and digital assets. These conversations have become increasingly necessary as regulators like the Securities and Exchange Commission have failed. Instead of developing a targeted and purposeful framework that would promote innovation and protect consumers, they have led with regulation by enforcement action. This approach threatens the United States' leadership in the future of digital assets, a future that could better protect privacy, reduce business costs, and empower more Americans. This flawed approach by the SEC has required congressional action, and FIT 21 is the joint response of the Financial Services Committee and the Agriculture Committee. FIT 21 establishes a framework consistent with existing law, but also appropriate for the digital assets in question and their unique characteristics. First, There is no clear current market structure for the regulation of digital assets in the United States. The SEC has merely been regulating by enforcement action. This leaves digital asset innovators and consumers to play a guessing game. This not only stifles innovation, it lends itself to the SEC picking winners and losers. Meanwhile, there's currently no way for digital asset commodities to be registered or regulated by the CFTC. Chair Gensler has repeatedly said most digital assets are securities. However, by his own admission, we know that not all digital assets are securities. In fact, it's estimated that 70% or more are commodities. This is among the most important reasons for the passage of FIT 21. The SEC does not regulate commodities. It regulates securities. The CFTC does not regulate securities. It regulates commodities. The advent of digital assets, which can be either securities or commodities, has created a regulatory black hole that FIT 21 seeks to remedy. By defining digital asset commodities and securities and creating a clear regulatory market structure, FIT 21 protects consumers and provides the regulatory clarity for digital asset developers to innovate. The framework offered by FIT 21 will give clear guidance to regulators and thus allow consumers to better judge digital assets for themselves, avoid scams, reduce instances of data theft, and lessen the potential for market manipulation. FIT 21 is good for our constituents and good for the country. I encourage all of us to support this important legislation. Moving on to H.R. 5403, the Central Bank Digital Currency, CBDC, Anti-Surveillance State Act. I'm a proud original co-sponsor of H.R. 5403 because I share the concerns of many of my colleagues about the consequences of a Federal Reserve Bank digital currency and what that could mean for our constituents and their privacy. If issued, a government-controlled CBDC would give federal bureaucrats the ability to track every transaction Americans make, as well as the ability to block any transaction they so choose. This would be an unprecedented level of surveillance in the daily lives of everyday Americans, and we should all be concerned about the potential threats to individual rights and privacy. A CBDC would give the government the power to shut off access to payments and freeze the bank accounts of law-abiding citizens and institutions for political reasons, just like we saw with the Canadian trucker protests or with Operation Choke Point. I hope all of my colleagues will join me in standing against the creation of a central bank digital currency by supporting this bill. Finally, this rule also provides for consideration of H.R. 192, a bill which would prohibit non-citizens from voting in the elections in the District of Columbia. Americans are rightly concerned with election integrity. Free and fair elections are essential to any democracy. We all agree on that. What we should also agree on is that non-citizens voting in elections undermines confidence in elections. It's why the District of Columbia's Local Residents Voting Rights Amendment Act is so objectionable. It allows non-citizens to vote in D.C. elections, including illegal immigrants and foreign agents. It goes without saying that these individuals in particular have interests that are at odds with our own. They literally represent the interests of other countries, including countries hostile to the United States. Why would we want to allow Russian or China or any foreign agent to vote on policies that impact the U.S. Capitol? It defies logic, but that is exactly what D.C. has inspired to do. My colleagues might ask why we even have an interest in the affairs of local laws in this respect. The answer is quite simple. D.C. has a unique and constitutional relationship with the United States Congress. A lack of confidence in American elections anywhere threatens the confidence in American elections everywhere. It is incumbent upon us to protect the integrity of D.C. elections when the district's elected officials fail to do so, when they allow non-citizens and people with loyalty to other countries to vote. Mr. Speaker, I look forward to consideration of these three important pieces of legislation and urge the passage of this rule. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman from Indiana reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the gentlelady from Indiana for yielding me the customary 30 minutes, and I yield myself such time as I may consume. Mr. Speaker, there's really not much to say. If you were to listen to my friend on the other side, you'd think that these bills are going to change the world the second the ink dries, but they're not. This is just another week of wasted time. More of the same from the Republican leadership here in Congress that is completely out of touch with what the American people actually care about. H.R. 192 is another GOP attempt to meddle in D.C. politics. They spend more time worrying about Washington, D.C. than they do about their own constituents. And it's astounding to me that the party that claims to care about small government and local control wants to have the federal government tell local leaders here in D.C. how to run their local elections. Apparently, they're for local control unless it's local control by Democrats, in which case, never mind. And to hear anybody on the Republican side talk about election integrity is rich, especially from a party that is filled with election deniers. We are also here to consider H.R. 4763, a bill that provides an upper hand to the crypto industry instead of meaningfully addressing gaps in digital asset regulation. And finally, we will meet on H.R. 5403, a bill that prevents the U.S. from exploring digital currency. Now, I know my friends on the other side of the aisle are afraid of innovation, but 130 countries representing 98% of global GDP are looking into digital currency. Maybe, just maybe, it's something we should look into as well. Unfortunately, I think some of my friends on the other side want to go back to stone tablets. It's our job in Congress to address the privacy concerns, not to bury our heads in the sand and pretend like the world isn't moving forward. Mr. Speaker, it's all stunts instead of solutions, extremism over bipartisanship, and it's really a shame. This narrow majority could have given us a chance to work together in a bipartisan way. But instead, my friends over on the other side of the aisle have pandered to their most extreme members over and over and over again. They let the extremists kick out their own speaker. They let the extremists dictate the agenda on the House floor. They let the extremists take down 7 rule votes since January 2023, a stunning indictment of their ability to get anything done. And speaking of indictments, Republicans are skipping their real jobs to take day trips up to New York to try to undermine Donald Trump's criminal trial. No time to work with Democrats, but plenty of time to put on weird matching cult uniforms and stand behind President Trump with their bright red ties and like pathetic props. Maybe they want to distract from the fact that their candidate for president has been indicted more times than he's been elected. Maybe they don't want to talk about the fact that the leader of their party is on trial for covering up hush money payments to a porn star for political gain, not to mention 3 other criminal felony prosecutions he's facing. Now, I understand why my Republican friends want to distract from Donald Trump. They don't want to talk about how Trump had the worst jobs record since the Great Depression, how he sold out our allies and empowered our adversaries. So they bring silly things like this to the floor to deflect blame and distract from the fact that they have no real vision, just division, and no real plans to make life better for the American people. And with that, I reserve my time.
The chair would like to remind members to refrain from engaging in personalities towards presumed nominees for the office of the president. The gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. The gentlewoman from Indiana is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd just like to note that the bury the head in the sand approach is the very approach that Chairman Gensler has been taking with regard to the regulation of digital assets. Our colleagues seem to be less concerned about getting a regulatory framework for consumer protection and are hurrying to put in a central bank digital currency for digital surveillance. With that, I reserve.
The gentlewoman from Indiana reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, a few moments ago, I was admonished for stating the simple fact that the former president was indicted by a grand jury and is on trial in a court of law. That's not my opinion. It's just the truth. So I have a parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman will state his inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, has the chair determined it's unparliamentary to state a fact?
The The chair is not in a position to determine the veracity of remarks made on the floor. That members must avoid personalities.
Yeah, well, that's unbelievable. Last week during debate, a Republican member of this House said, and I quote, "Watch the former President of the United States being hauled into court day after day with a sham trial," end quote. He wasn't admonished. I just referenced the same trial, and I was. So, Mr. Speaker, I have to ask a further parliamentary inquiry.
The gentleman will state his inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, is it correct that members of Congress can mention the trial of the presumptive nominee for president, call it a sham, and question the integrity of the judge, but a reference to the mere existence of that same trial without any characterization that's out of order?
The chair will not issue an advisory opinion.
Well, one last parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Speaker. Is this restriction originally founded, at least in part, on the principle in Jefferson's manual that, quote, in Parliament, to speak irreverently or seditiously against the king is against order, end quote? Is that what this is about? I have Jefferson's manual here.
Members must avoid personalities in debates. The chair will direct members to Rule 17 in Section 370 of the House Rules and Manual.
Yeah. So it is, in fact, based on what's in Jefferson's manual. Mr. Speaker, Donald Trump might want to be a king, but he's not a king. He is not a presumptive king. He's not even the president. He's a presumptive nominee. And I know you're trying to do your job and follow precedent, but frankly, at some point, it's time for this body to recognize that there is no precedent for this situation. We have a presumptive nominee for president facing 88 felony counts, and we're being prevented from even acknowledging it. These are not alternative facts. These are real facts. A candidate for president of the United States is on trial for sending a hush money payment to a porn star to avoid a sex scandal during his 2016 campaign, and then fraudulently disguising those payments in violation of the law. He's also charged with conspiring to overturn the election. He's also charged with stealing classified information, and a jury has already found him liable for rape in a civil court. And yet, in this Republican-controlled House, it's okay to talk about the trial, but you have to call it a sham.
We take down his words.
It's okay to say the jury is rigged.
Mr. Speaker, I demand that his words be taken down.
It's okay to say the court is corrupt.
The gentleman will suspend.
But not Trump is corrupting the rule of law.
Indiana, I demand that his words be taken down. The gentleman from Massachusetts will be seated. The clerk will report the words.
It's going to take some time, so let's just hang out here. We got to figure out exactly what the words were. Yeah. All right. So, Mr. Carl, we're gonna figure out exactly how we want to proceed here. He said stuff that's clearly out of order. She made a timely demand. We're going to get the words back from the official reporters so that the clerk can read them. That's going to take some time.
Yeah, I think this is I think it's a poorly crafted bill to begin with, and I think this is I agree with Mr. Crow. This is exactly the wrong way to proceed. But let me ask either of you. I mean, what did the witnesses say during the hearing on this bill? Did we hear from both sides on? Was there a hearing on this bill or a markup or?
I'm not on the committee.
You're not on the committee, but you're testifying on the bill. Yeah.
From my experience on active duty, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well,
No,
you can't tell me whether or not there was a hearing on this bill.
Yeah, I can tell you. Yeah, there was no hearing on this bill. This has been pushed through without proper process. Yeah. Without a proper full engagement, and I think the results reflect that. It is half-baked in a very dangerous effort.
I mean, I don't know whether my Republican friends no longer believe in the committee process, but I mean, we have committees that are supposed to do hearings where people can bring witnesses and you can hear from all sides, and then if there's problems with the bill, you can make amendments and you can mark it up, and then we can, address some of the issues that way, and there was no process at all. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, you are correct.
This is the first time that it's going to be talked about in a hearing setting before the Rules Committee. And I assume, Mr. Self, you don't believe in the ICC at all?
What I'm asking is that we make sure the ICC stays in its proper role as defined by the member nations. And I will tell you,
So do you believe are you against the ICC pursuing the case against Hamas?
What I have said is we need to make sure the ICC stays in its lane, which is defined by its member nations, and it says that you cannot go after a nation except if the events occur on its property. Palestine is not a nation.
So they should not go after Hamas under your definition?
No, absolutely
Okay.
not. No,
I
the
disagree with you.
ICC.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I will tell you, Secretary Blinken has called the ICC took a profoundly wrong-headed decision on these arrest warrants. I don't understand why. I came in here expecting Democrats to support this
I
bill.
just fundamentally disagree with you. I think Hamas should be held accountable, and I think the crimes that are happening in Gaza right now, those who are responsible should be held accountable too. This is about victims, not about whether your ally is being questioned or whether your adversary is being questioned. This is about the victims in Israel, the victims on October 7th, and the victims in Gaza. Mr. Crow.
Yeah, Ranking Member, I think it's really important to say, you heard several folks mentioned that they don't believe in subjecting non-parties to jurisdiction of the court, and yet Mr. Self, Chairman Burgess, and almost every member of this committee has actually signed on to, that is correct, Mr. Massey is not, he's one of the few who has not, as a matter of fact, but almost everybody else here has signed on to bills and efforts that would promote the court's jurisdiction over non-parties, in this case, Russia. There's plenty of precedents by folks in this room supporting the jurisdiction of the ICC over a non-party in the case of Russia, Ukraine, and other instances.
Yeah.
And again, I say, Ranking Member, Israel is different. It is a major non-NATO ally. Russia is not. And I leave it at that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so is Pakistan and Qatar, by the way. But the bottom line is that, I'm saying, if somebody's watching this, I'm sure they're amazed at what appears to be this incredible hypocrisy and these double standards that my friends on the other side of the aisle seem to be endorsing. And I have to tell you, I mean, I think human rights ought to be a centerpiece of what this country is all about. And the idea that, you're bringing this resolution that is going to sanction, by the way, am I correct too, there's a process that unfolds, right? I mean, so these arrest warrants that have been requested have not been issued, am I correct?
That's correct.
Right, there's another level here that has to be reached, and that requires investigations, and it requires additional.
Ranking Member, it will go quickly.
What?
We're talking about a week. We're talking about 2 weeks. That's why this bill has been brought to the floor so quickly, because we're talking about these decisions will be made. This is not congressional investigations of a year. This is week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. This is very fast.
And where did you get that date from, that these will be decided on? Where did the ICC tell you that in 2 weeks they're going to have a decision, or 3 weeks?
As far as I know, it's common knowledge, because I've seen it several places.
No, these processes normally do not go that fast. They usually take a long time. In fact, there have been investigations involving issues in the West Bank and in Gaza for many years that are have not matured yet. And as you mentioned, Ranking Member, in this instance, what happens is the ICC does not have the authority to try or to conduct investigations in absentia. So the issuing of the arrest warrants is the next step in the investigative process.
But I think
where's
they've announced, ranking member,
where's
that
the
it's gonna
common
go
knowledge
fast.
coming from? I don't know can you point, rather than saying common knowledge, can you point to us a citation from the ICC that says that in 2 weeks or 3 weeks?
I believe there are statements from the ICC that they're going to
Can you
take
produce
this
any of them for us?
three-member court.
Can you produce
will
any?
then actually, well, I can. I'll get
Oh,
back
you know,
to
it would be,
you, ranking member.
and that's one of the reasons why a hearing might have been a good thing to do. Because rather than people just saying things and saying, oh, it's common knowledge, that maybe if you had a hearing, you could actually get answers to these questions, and I think we would maybe have different conclusions.
Seeing the media is controlled by the other side, I think common knowledge would be something
All right,
we
well,
would
I think now
probably
we're
hang
going
our hat
down,
on.
we're going down a conspiracy, foxhole here that doesn't, I mean, whatever. You know what? The bottom line is, this is a lousy way to legislate, and quite frankly, it's shameful that we are here dealing with this. This is a serious matter, and we should be focused on how do you end the violence, and how do you protect the victims, and how do you prevent there from being further victims. And it seems that that's not what you're concerned about, and I'm not interested in, quite frankly, conspiracy theories and all that other stuff. With that, I would yield back.
Chair, thanks, the gentleman. Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Kentucky.
Leadership to manipulate the video in the Jankowicz matter. It is dishonest enough to manipulate the video in this matter, and that is a good reason to withhold it.
Ranking Member Raskin, Ranking Member Nadler, Chairman Comer, and we're missing a chairman here. Mr. Jordan, I think, sent a substitute, which is unfortunate, because I would have liked to have asked Chairman Jordan about his noncompliance with the congressional subpoena, but I guess maybe he was too afraid to come or didn't want to have to deal with that question. I got to be honest with you. I mean, what the American people are sick of is how pathetic this House of Representatives have become. So let's just, I mean, this is a distraction from the fact that the Republican nominee for president is a convicted felon. That's what this is all about. And Republicans have weaponized committee after committee to the point that it is doing great damage to this institution. Democrats, Republicans, and independents are looking at the way this House is being run, and they think it's pathetic. You know, we are here because Republicans are falsely claiming that the Attorney General is playing politics with the Justice Department. They are irresponsibly attacking the DOJ, making absurd claims that it is being weaponized. These contempt resolutions represent more of those attacks. My Republican friends have gone on and on about how Democrats have weaponized the DOJ, but their conspiracy theories crumbled this morning when Hunter Biden, the son of the president, was found guilty in a federal court on 3 gun-related charges. When Donald Trump was convicted, we saw an immediate reaction from Republican leaders. It was like within seconds that this trial is a sham, the judge is corrupt, the jury is rigged, and the contrast today is just staggering. Apparently, when a Republican is convicted, it's weaponization. But when a Democrat is convicted, the president's son no less, that's justice. I mean, give me a break. Hunter Biden was found guilty by a jury of his peers, just like Donald Trump, because this is our justice system at work. The divide here is stunning, and it's a great reminder that one political party remains committed to the rule of law and the other doesn't. It's that simple. Did Hunter Biden walk out of the courthouse this morning and slam the judge or the prosecutors? Did he claim some vast conspiracy to weaponize the legal system against him? No, he did not. In a statement on the verdict, President Biden said, and I quote, "I will accept the outcome of this case and will continue to respect the judicial process," end quote. Now I ask, after the verdict this morning, how can any Republican in their right mind argue that the Biden administration is weaponizing the DOJ to hurt Republicans and to help Democrats? They just convicted the president's own son, to say nothing of the fact that the Department of Justice is currently trying a Democratic senator and has indicted a Democratic member of this House. I mean, do Republicans still believe that President Biden is weaponizing the justice system? Because if he is, he's sure doing a lousy job. And as usual, the only Trump derangement syndrome going on around here is on the other side of the aisle. I mean, people are saying that Biden orchestrated the conviction of his own son in order to justify the criminal charges against Trump. That is how you think when you are in a cult. So here's the bottom line. Republicans just can't wrap their heads around the idea that their presidential candidate, your presumptive nominee, is a convicted felon. That is not the result of a sham process or some vast conspiracy by the Biden administration. That is the result of the truth. And these attacks on our justice system have to come to a stop. They are dangerous, they are irresponsible, they are nothing but false conspiracy theories being pushed to try and excuse the actions of the former president, and they are made even more absurd by the outcome of the trial this morning in Delaware. Mr. Raskin, for the record, can you contrast the president and the administration's compliance with this investigation with that of Mr. Jordan's noncompliance with the January 6th investigation?
Yes, will you allow me to comment on what you just said as well, Congressman McGovern, and I'm very grateful to you for pointing this out. Hunter Biden was just convicted of every single count that was brought against him by the U.S. Department of Justice. I've not heard a single Democrat anywhere in the country cry fraud, cry fixed, cry rigged, cry kangaroo court, or any of the many epithets that our colleagues have mobilized against the U.S. Department of Justice and our federal court system, despite the fact that Donald Trump was not even tried in federal court. That was at the state level. And they pretend to support state prosecutors and state judges. But then they attribute it to the federal government and they say rigged, fixed, kangaroo court, and so on. You don't hear a single peep out of any Democrat saying that. Why? We believe in the rule of law. We believe in the justice system, and we stand by it. And you know what? Hunter Biden had every right and benefit that Donald Trump had. He had the right to a presumption of innocence. He had a right to counsel, which he exercised like Donald Trump did. He had a right to a jury of his peers, and he had a right to a unanimous verdict. And in both cases, a jury unanimously found against the defendant on all counts in both cases. And compare and contrast the difference in reaction between the Republicans and the Democrats. The Republicans are attacking our entire system of justice and the rule of law because they don't like the way that one case came out. Whereas the son of the President of the United States is prosecuted, and I don't hear a single Democrat crying foul. Now, both Hunter Biden and Donald Trump can afford themselves of every right of appeal that there is. And we stand by the appellate system. But I think that, it's just outrageous to see the way that our colleagues turn on the rule of law and the system of justice. And it's a profoundly dangerous thing that we witness. Now, you've asked me to contrast, Chairman McGovern, the cooperation and the compliance of Attorney General Garland and the Department of Justice with the non-cooperation of Jim Jordan with the January 6th Select Committee. Well, let's start with this. As I said before, we have gotten substantially and fully and materially everything that this committee has asked for from the Department of Justice and from the Biden administration. Again, that is a striking contrast with the Trump administration. I remember the day when President Trump, when he was in office, said there would be no cooperation with any committees or subcommittees in Congress. And they blocked investigations in more than 100 cases. And specifically with respect to impeachment, which is super dangerous, he did not allow people who were material witnesses, who had relevant factual testimony to render to the impeachment investigation in the first impeachment of Donald Trump to testify. He said they could not testify, and he just shut it down. I did not hear any of my colleagues have a problem with that. And now they're claiming, well, Merrick Garland has only cooperated 99.99% with our committee. We also want the audio tape. It's not enough for us that we can read every word verbatim that is in the transcript. That's not enough for them. They want the audio tape too. I mean, it's like a sick joke that they would go from standing by Donald Trump's horrific obstructionism of congressional power than to trying to hold the Attorney General of the United States in contempt. Now, as for our friend, Chairman Jordan, who I also wish were here today, he wasn't the only one, by the way. There were other members who were subpoenaed by the January 6th committee to give us whatever relevant material information they had about the violent insurrection against our government in order to force Mike Pence to step outside of his constitutional role and simply declare Donald Trump the president and hand him the keys to the presidency. So we didn't have a word of testimony from Scott Perry. We didn't have a word of testimony from Jim Jordan. We didn't have a word of testimony from Andy Biggs. We didn't have a word of testimony from Kevin McCarthy, and we didn't have a word of testimony from Mo Brooks, nor did we receive a single document from Scott Perry, nor did we receive a single document from Jim Jordan, nor did we receive a single document from Andy Biggs, nor did we receive a single document from Kevin McCarthy, nor did we receive a single document from Mo Brooks. So there you're talking about 100% noncompliance and obstruction. They want to hold the Attorney General of the United States of America in contempt for 99.99% compliance with what they're saying now and 100% compliance in reality for what it was that the committee asked for.
Yeah, well, I mean, I regret that Chairman Jordan didn't see fit to come and testify today, because I would have liked to have heard his answer to the same question. But I just want to point out for the record that Hunter Biden was found guilty by a jury of his peers in a case prosecuted by a U.S. attorney appointed by President Trump, presided over by a federal judge appointed by President Trump, and investigated by the FBI with the director appointed by President Trump. And you don't hear anybody here talking about complaining about weaponization. And I just, Mr. Chairman, just for the record, would like to read the statement from President Biden in relationship to the verdict today. I quote him: "As I said last week, I am the president, but I am also a dad. Jill and I love our son, and we are so proud of the man he is today. So many families who have had loved ones battle addiction understand the feeling of pride seeing someone you love come out the other side and be so strong and resilient in recovery. As I also said last week, I will accept the outcome of this case and will continue to respect the judicial process as Hunter considers an appeal. Jill and I will always be there for Hunter and the rest of our family with our love and support. Nothing will ever change that," end quote. I think the fact that we are here wasting our time on this garbage is pathetic. I really do. Mr. Raskin, you want to?
Well, you know, if you can engage me in a little thought experiment, what if one of President Trump's children were prosecuted by the U.S. Department of Justice? The entire Republican Party would be in an uproar, demanding that everybody be fired and that the investigation be quashed, especially if it related to exercise of Second Amendment rights. I've not heard any of them rise to the valiant defense of Hunter Biden's Second Amendment rights, but be that as it may, this is the rule of law, and Hunter Biden had every right that was afforded to him under the rule of law, just like Donald Trump did, and they were both convicted, and they both have the right to appeal, but we should all be standing by the rule of law and the court system, and I would love to hear one of my colleagues defend the discrepancy in their reaction to the Trump verdict and the Hunter Biden verdict, if they can.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I do want to correct the record. I think one Republican did come to the defense of Hunter Biden in a way. He's a member of this committee, but he's not here right now. That's Thomas Massey. He said Hunter Biden might deserve to be in jail for something, but purchasing a gun is not it. There are millions of marijuana users who own guns in this country, and none of them should be in jail for possessing a firearm against current laws. I don't agree with all that he is saying on that, but the point of the matter is.
Well, look, I think complex questions may be raised on appeal in that case, in any case, and we've got to stand by the system of justice. This is why all of the ethical improprieties and transgressions taking place in the Supreme Court today are so alarming and demoralizing, because you've got, people, billionaire sugar daddies giving millions of dollars to Supreme Court justices, and it undermines everybody's confidence in the rule of law.
And no complaints about that, no concerns about that. I mean, and again, we see what we've been seeing all in this Congress. If Republicans are held accountable for anything, it's a weaponization of the judicial system. If Democrats are held accountable, well, that's that's justice under the law. I've never, ever seen such hypocrisy in my life. And the idea, again, that this is what we're spending our time on, with all that we have to deal with in this country and in the world right now, this is what they think is so important, to get an audio recording of something they already have the transcript of, that this is the world comes to an end if we don't do this. We have to hold the Attorney General in contempt. I mean, give me a break.
I mean, Mr. McGovern, this is an impeachment investigation, and so I have not heard a single colleague explain how there might be something of value to understanding whether there's a high crime and misdemeanor caught in that minuscule space between the written version and the audio version. Not a single one has suggested how a high crime or misdemeanor will emerge in Joe Biden clearing his throat. But I do believe that they might be able to find something with a cut and paste job to turn into a great political attack ad, and nobody has denied that that's the real motivation.
Yeah, this is not about high crimes or misdemeanors. This is really about a distraction from the fact that their nominee for president is a convicted felon, period. I thank you for your time. I yield back.
Chair, thank the gentleman. Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania for questions.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
I'll yield to you for any questions you may have.
Yeah, well, I mean, what's the point of asking questions at this point? I mean, these bills, as I said at the outset, are not going to be signed into law. They've been loaded up with all kinds of culture war matters that don't belong in these bills. And it really is quite disappointing to see how dysfunctional we've become. I began my career as an intern up here. I've worked as a staffer and served as a member of Congress now for many years, and I remember when the appropriations process was truly bipartisan, when regularly, when the House would bring an appropriations bill to the floor, there'd be large bipartisan votes. That's not what we are right now. And any attempt at trying to be bipartisanship, then come to the Rules Committee, and the Rules Committee will screw it all up so that it is partisan. We had an NDAA bill that passed out of committee 57-1. I mean, people, Democrats and Republicans, 57-1. You can't get Democrats and Republicans to agree on lunch, but they agreed on moving that bill forward. It comes to the Rules Committee, goes to the floor, and it becomes this totally partisan vehicle. So, I mean, bipartisan.
Will the gentleman yield?
Yeah, happy to.
Did it pass on the floor, the NDAA?
Yeah, it did, yeah. Well, but so but that bill is not, that bill as it is not going to look like it is if it ever sees the light of day. But there's no attempt at bipartisanship, and this obsession that my Republican friends have with attacking women's reproductive health care and going after the LGBTQ plus community. I mean, it is outrageous. It is offensive, and I think you get up every morning and say, how do we go after women's rights today? How do we attack the LGBTQ community today? And by the way, those are human rights issues. Those are human rights issues. Women's reproductive health care is a human rights issue, whether you want to admit it or not. LGBTQ plus issues are human rights issues. Climate change is a human rights and a national security issue as well. And again, these partisan bills that are loaded up with MAGA priorities to get a partisan vote, I mean, it is a waste of time. I guess, again, maybe it's good fundraising for the Republican base, but it's like this is not the way this place is supposed to work. And it really is disheartening. So, yeah, I could ask a 1,000 questions, but on what? On bills that are not going to ever be signed into law the way they are written. They're going to have to be dramatically and drastically changed. And by doing it this way means that, we will probably get either a temporary short-term spending bill, and then we'll get if we get to a long-term spending bill, there'll be really no thoughtful and meaningful discussion to make sure we're getting it all right, because we'll be all rushed to the very, very end. But I got to tell you, things really need to change, and I would tell my friends this appropriations process is not the way we should do business here. And again, and some of the things that you feel you have to include, they're offensive. They really are offensive. And so I thank everybody for being here, but I'll spare you any questions, and I'll yield back my time.
Chair thanks the gentleman. Gentleman yields back the gentleman from South Carolina who wishes to make.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and you're right. We have a lot of issues with these bills that are before us, and it's not just our prerogative to remind the committee of these issues, but we think it's our obligation because what we do here is supposed to be important, and it reflects on our ability to lead in the world and to be viewed credibly. But when it comes to global leadership, we have a very different idea of what leadership looks like. After listening to your opening statement, I mean, we believe that Joe Biden has rebuilt America's standing in the world after Donald Trump ruined it, quite frankly. And it was Republicans, not Joe Biden, who held up aid to Ukraine for 9 months because their side buys into the Kremlin propaganda. It was a Republican president who went to North Korea, Mr. Chairman, who actually said after meeting with Kim Jong-un that we fell in love. Who says that? Donald Trump says that. It was a Republican president named Donald Trump who fawned over Vladimir Putin, who can't find enough superlative adjectives to praise people like Viktor Orban and every other dictator in the world. I'm glad that we have a president right now who is trying to rebuild America's image around the world and who is standing up for democracy, which is something that used to be a bipartisan value that we all were committed to protecting democracy, not only here in the United States, but helping to promote it and protect it around the world. But we are here today to consider 3 more extreme MAGA funding bills for fiscal year 2025. H.R. 8752, the GOP's Department of Homeland Security appropriation bill, wastes billions of dollars on useless, ineffective border measures while disregarding present threats from terrorists, foreign adversaries, and violent extremists. We're going to hear a lot from our Republican colleagues about how this bill will secure the border, but it won't. And let's be real here. Republicans don't want to secure the border. They had a chance to do so with a bipartisan Senate border plan. They killed it because Trump said so. They're more interested in exploiting the border and creating chaos than actually doing anything to address problems at the border in a real and meaningful way. This is yet another wasted opportunity for them to address what they claim is their top concern. Next, we have H.R. 8771, the Department of State and Foreign Operations Appropriations Bill. It diminishes our country's leadership and totally isolates us on the world stage. The devastating cuts in this bill amount to an American retreat that shortchanges foreign assistance, harms our efforts to protect women, and deeply damages our ability to lead the global response to the climate crisis. And then we have H.R. 8774, Republicans' Department of Defense Appropriations Bill, filled yet again with a dumpster of culture war garbage. June is Pride Month, and as people across the country celebrate LGBTQ plus people, this MAGA Republican majority is using the appropriations process to promote hate and bigotry. And they're attacking women's rights 2 years nearly to the day since the Supreme Court ended the federal right to abortion, which unleashed abortion bans across the country and emboldened opponents of human rights around the world. And 40 years since the devastating global gag rule was first introduced to prevent NGOs from providing essential reproductive health education and access worldwide. It is shameful and it is wrong that Republicans are abusing the appropriations process to rip freedom away from Americans and try to control their lives. Enough already. Stop with the culture war nonsense and let's get to work on doing the business of the American people without all this extreme MAGA nonsense. None of these bills, none of them will be signed into law the way they are written right now. We all know that. This is not about serious legislating. This is about show business right now, performing for the most extreme right wing of the Republican base. And it is a waste of time. It is a waste of time. And I don't know what's wrong with you people, but All you seem to care about is attacking women's reproductive freedom and women's reproductive rights and beating up on the LGBTQ plus community. It is offensive. It is sick. We ought to be focused on serious matters of moving these important appropriations bills forward rather than wasting all of this time. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank our witnesses for being here, and I yield back my time. And now on to the legislation that we're going to be considering here today. You're absolutely right. I disagree with everything you said, and even more strongly than I usually do. You know, this committee should be a place where we debate big ideas, where we tackle important challenges and make real progress. But under the Republican majority, we've done the exact opposite, and this week's measures are no different. We have another funding bill that goes after the LGBTQ community, attacks dreamers, and will make Congress less reflective of the people we represent. We have another thinly veiled attempt at voter suppression under the guise of preventing voter fraud. Even though we all know the voter fraud that my Republican friends are talking about is just shorthand for the big lie that Trump pushed when he tried to illegally steal the election after he lost it fair and square. We all know what's going on here. Republicans do better in elections when fewer people vote, so they want to make it harder for people to actually be able to vote. Look at who this bill would disproportionately impact. People who change their name when they get married, including millions of women. People who can't afford to take a day off from work to go down to the town clerk and get a copy of their birth certificate. People who don't have $130 to get a passport. This isn't about making our elections more secure. It's about making it harder to vote. That is what this bill is aimed at doing. Now, we know what's going on here. Republicans are laying the groundwork for them to discredit the upcoming election. If they win, you'll never hear about this until the next election. But if they lose, they will say it is because of voter fraud. Voter fraud, which, by the way, the Heritage Foundation, you know, that right-wing think tank that you guys always associate yourself with, they can only find 24 cases of it in the last 20 years. They say this is about protecting the right of citizens to vote. For every case of real voter fraud, they want to take away the votes of millions of actual citizens. What a disgrace. We have another effort to make it easier to discriminate on campus, turning back the clock on civil rights because House Republicans continue to prioritize radical culture wars. And just days after July 4th, a day we celebrate actual freedom from tyranny, Republicans have brought up bills about freedom for refrigerators and dishwashers. I mean, you really can't make this stuff up. They have no problem taking away the rights of living, breathing human beings, no problem depriving women of their reproductive rights, stripping away freedom from the LGBTQ community, hindering families who want IVF. None of those groups deserve freedom, according to the Republicans. But refrigerators, sign them up. Apparently, nothing says freedom to them quite like forcing their constituents to pay more on their electric bills. For the record, if somebody wants to keep a 50-year-old refrigerator, that's their right. Nobody's going to stop them. That's nuts. And it's not what this bill is about. This is about Republicans giving billion-dollar companies the freedom to cut corners when they make appliances, keeping all of our utility bills high and polluting the air and water while they're at it. I mean, that's what they are in favor of. But, Mr. Chairman, at the end of the day, it's not just about the legislation here. It's about two competing visions for America. Democrats want an economy that lifts people up. We're fighting for workers. We want opportunity for kids, success for families, and dignity for seniors. We want democracy to be secure at home and around the world. We have a vision of a better future and an idea of how to get there. And these bills before our committee today once again show that Republicans are more interested in division and taking us backwards and turning the clock back. On reproductive freedom, on voting rights, on lowering prices, on holding big corporations accountable, on all these things and more, they want to drag us back. That's what their party now stands for, and that's why we're wasting time with more misguided MAGA junk instead of working together to get things done for the American people. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman from New York is recognized for any questions he may have for the panel.
Well, thank you very much. I find myself in always the unenviable position at the end of the dais, and we've had a great deal of debate today. I just want to say the following. Thank you, Mr. Lawler, for your tireless advocacy for the people of the state of New York. This was an unfair policy when this deduction was taken away, and this starts to right the wrong with the marriage penalty being eliminated. And it's going to help constituents if we can make this law. This should have been in the overall tax package is my strong feeling and belief. And I know the advocacy that's come out of Mr. LaLota, Mr. D'Esposito, yourself, Mr. Molinaro, Mr. Garbarino has been tireless as you fought for New York taxpayers. And I greatly appreciate that. I salute you for your time here today and certainly taking the heat from people all over the country here today. So I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
If I may, I want to correct my friend. I do not think of you as sitting at the end of the dais. I think of you as the anchor on the ship that steadies us in the storm. So we're happy to have you there. My friend requests recognition.
I just, for the record, because there's a lot of revisionist history here, I mean, we are here today because of the Trump tax bill that was jammed through the Senate on reconciliation that created this problem. So for all the finger pointing at Joe Biden, I mean, you guys who were here to vote for that horrible bill, that's your responsibility. The second thing I'm going to say is that listening to my friends on the Republican side, it's like you're not in charge. I mean, you are, I hate that this is the reality, but you are in control of the House of Representatives. The Ways and Means Committee, which Mr. Schneider is a member of and Mr. Lawler is not, actually does the tax stuff around here. So let's not lose sight of like who's running this place. So anyway, I appreciate you allowing me to have that indulgence, but the record needs to be straight here on what the reality is. And I thank the chairman. I yield back.
Thank you very much. I'll just add, if I may, that I'm very proud of the Trump tax cut, very proud to have voted for it. I think it unleashed incredible amounts of growth for this country and additional income for the federal government. And frankly, I think it's helped us revive some of the disastrous decisions that were made during the Biden administration. I know they certainly didn't overturn it, for the most part. They left it in place and certainly spent the revenue that it generated and then some on top of that. So in terms of, the SALT tax thing, again, I admire my friend's persistence in fighting for his constituents. That's exactly what he's supposed to do. I'm not sure I share the view on SALT that my other friends do, but, again, that's fair enough. They had an opportunity to vote against it. Some of the very people you're talking about did not vote for the Trump tax cut because of the SALT issue. They were fighting for it then. Obviously, Mr. Lawler wasn't here to do that, but some of his predecessors and some of his current colleagues certainly were. And again, that's fair enough. I mean, I don't agree with every single item in every bill that my own party brings forward. I sometimes fight against them too.
Did Mr.
we're in
Norman
there.
Convince you?
I'm sorry?
Didn't Mr. Norman convince you to review your position?
I always find Mr. Norman and every member of this committee on both sides of the aisle very convincing in what they say because they're always sincere in the questions that they ask and the points that they raise. That's why we allow such unlimited debate and are so generous to everyone who comes before this committee. A precedent that I did not establish, my friend did not establish, but our good friend, our successor, Pete Sessions, our predecessor, did establish. And that's why this one of the reasons it's very unique and entertaining committee. But one thing my friend, from Texas did say was we were going to vote on this at 9:30 this morning. If we were a little less eloquent and a little shorter in our comments, that might have actually come true. But that's not going to happen today. We're going to vote a little bit later. But again, I want to thank both of our witnesses, and I mean that quite sincerely. We appreciate you both coming on such short notice early in the morning. Appreciate the quality of debate. Again, Mr. Lawler, this was your first time here. We congratulate you. You've been here before, Mr. Snyder, but I think this is your first time this Congress, if I recall correctly. So again, we're very happy to have you as well. And with that, the witnesses are excused.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the gentleman from New York for yielding me the customary 30 minutes, and I yield myself such time as they may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, this entire Republican majority has been one gigantic, complete, total failure. A complete mess from day one with these people in charge. It's an embarrassment. We've got 8 weeks left in the 118th Congress to do our legislative work. 8 weeks. And instead of doing something to make life better for anyone, or hell, even the bare minimum by stopping a government shutdown, we are considering a no-good stopgap resolution that extends funding into 2025. And you gotta love this. You gotta love this. The gentleman from New York is on the floor today trying to convince everyone to vote for the bill, when Republicans cannot even convince their own members to vote for it. I mean, seriously. Every minute I look at my phone, I see another Republican defecting. Mr. Speaker, the Republican manager is wasting his time debating me. He needs to be debating his Republican friends who are coming out against the bill in droves. Clearly, they don't have the votes for this awful plan, so why are we wasting time here in this House on a bill that has no chance whatsoever of ever becoming law? Mr. Speaker, this is embarrassing for your side of the aisle. It's mid-September. Republicans said they would get all 12 separate appropriation bills done before we left for the August break. Yet another broken promise among a long list from Speaker Johnson to add on to all the broken promises from Speaker McCarthy before him. And House Republicans are once again showing their deep disrespect for the veterans community by proposing a 6-month CR that shortchanges the VA cost of war toxic exposures fund by $12 billion. $12 billion. That is morally reprehensible and just plain cruel. These are our veterans who we're talking about. How the hell can they turn their backs on our veterans? But to be clear, this is the Republican playbook. A big promise, and it gets broken. A promise like we will have a robust, effective appropriations process, and it gets broken. A promise to continue supporting our veterans, and it gets broken. And now we are headed into another potential shutdown, all because they want to play political games. And to make matters worse, Mr. Speaker, Republicans have jammed the SAVE Act onto the CR. Because why not mix up government funding with more ridiculous conspiracy theories about voter fraud? I know why they want to bring this bill to the floor. They are worried they won't win in November without pushing conspiracy theories. Mr. Speaker, let's set something straight. Non-citizens cannot vote in federal elections. Let me repeat that. Non-citizens cannot vote in federal elections. And if they vote, it is illegal. It is a crime. And guess what? They've done studies. Even conservative institutes say there is no evidence that non-citizens voted illegally in large enough numbers to shift the outcome of any election. We all know what this is about. It's not about voter fraud. This is part of their Project 2025 plan to undermine the vote count and take total control of the government. You see, Mr. Speaker, they want power whether they win or lose at the ballot box. And so they will claim voter fraud whatever happens. The facts be damned. I mean, do Republicans really want to talk about the threat of voter fraud? Well, let me remind the American people, the only ones committing voter fraud in an attempt to overthrow an election are Republicans. We've seen this movie before. Following Trump's loss in the 2020 election, he and his cronies allegedly conspired to overturn the will of the American people by submitting fake electors to falsely certify that Trump won the election. He didn't win the election. He lost the election. And what did those efforts get them? Well, let me tell you. Dozens of people across 4 states have been indicted over this election fraud scheme. So, Republicans want to talk about the threat of voter fraud? Give me a break. They are the threat. This horrible CR will never become law the way it is structured. We really are just here wasting more time after House Republicans failed to do what they should have done months ago. This rule before us today would also bring to the floor 5 bills that Republicans claim will target China. 5 bills that are actually weak on China. 5 ineffective bills that don't get the job done and don't represent a real attempt to actually address some of the very serious concerns we have about the PRC. Mr. Speaker, I've been a critic of China's human rights record for decades, longer than some of my colleagues have been in Congress. Hell, I was sanctioned by the Chinese government in July. I can't travel to China. My wife can't travel to China. My son can't travel to China. My daughter can't travel to China. I can't even converse with any Chinese officials. You know, I've written strong, effective bills that would hold the PRC accountable. And so they don't like me. They sanction me, and I wear that sanction as a badge of honor. But let me be clear, these bills that the gentleman referred to are not about taking a strong stance against China. They're poorly written, weak bills that don't get the job done. It's like they're like written for a press release. Oh, I'm sorry, because they are meant for a press release, not about serious legislating. Believe it or not, we can strengthen our national security. We can stand up to China on human rights, and we can support our veterans and make sure they get the care that they need. We can fund the government, and we can do all of that and more if we work together. That's what people want. They want us to behave like adults. Sadly, Republican leadership is more interested in sound bites and Fox News headlines heading into November than they are about governing. And I would say they would rather put politics ahead of progress. But, Mr. Speaker, Project 2025 isn't just politics. It's weird, it's shameful, and it's deeply dystopian. It's dangerous stuff. Americans are tired of this garbage, and I think they are about to make some very different choices starting November. And with that, I reserve my time.
The chair would remind members refrain from engaging personalities towards nominees for the office of the president, and also maintain decorum